Welcome back to Lost in Games Unscripted, the series where we are increasingly talking about the writing in games and movies and books and TV shows and whatever else comes to mind in a given time. For the most part, the past few weeks, I have done a bunch of videos talking mostly about The Walking Dead, mostly about the game, the Telltale's version of The Walking Dead game. A little bit about the show. We talked about Negan in the last video. But for the first time in this series, we're actually going to step outside of the universe of The Walking Dead and talk about something. It's another game, so we're still in the gaming world, but one that I've thought about before, and I mentioned a little bit when I covered it in Philosophy and Ethics in Games, Fallout 4. And I've got some thoughts. The Fallout 4 story isn't exactly the most beloved story in a generation. It has its moments, and it has some really interesting ethical conundrums and things to look at, but it got a lot of hate. And so I want to talk a little bit about the story itself and then some changes I would make. And honestly, this is probably going to wind up being a few different videos simply because it's such a big topic. There's a lot to discuss. And I don't want to sit here and try to make a 3-hour long video just talking about Fallout 4 and the writing. Mostly because I don't know that many people would sit through a 3-hour long. That would be a long video, guys. I don't think you understand quite how long that would be. Go watch some of my supercuts if you're curious of how long 3 hours can be on a YouTube video. I digress. I want to start, though, with a little bit of background because I think it's kind of important when I am talking about the Fallout 4 story because there's a division in the community. So there are the Fallout fans. These are the people that just love the Fallout games, maybe started playing with New Vegas or maybe even earlier with the Fallout 1 and 2 games. And they played some of the earlier games, and then Fallout 4 dropped, and a lot of those people did not like Fallout 4. They felt like it was not a true Fallout game. It messed with some of the lore, but it also didn't give you some of the choices that they thought it should have given you. Then there are the more, I guess you would call them casual fans, the people like me, that Fallout 4 was my first Fallout game. Now, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I played, the first game that I can remember playing was Doom, the original Doom, when it came out on PC in like 92, 93. 1992, 93, by the way, for those of you who might be a little bit younger and not realize that I was born in the last millennium. So I played Doom 2 when it came out, Duke Nukem. We played Wacky Wheels growing up on the computer. My dad and us boys, me and my brothers, we would take turns because with Wacky Wheels, you could play multiplayer and they just had different people on different sides of the keyboard. So I would take one half of it was a lot of fun. But we progressed through that. We eventually got a PlayStation, and we played Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo. I loved the Gran Turismo 1 and 2 were one of my all-time favorite. I love sports games, racing games, especially when I was younger. Played a lot of college football, a lot of NASCAR. I played NFL Blitz, if any of you remember. The original like NFL, they had like the football on fire and all kinds of cool abilities and stuff. A lot of fun games like that, but I was mostly into a lot of sports stuff. I didn't get into fantasy stuff. I didn't get into a lot of what would be considered RPGs, even though technically every game was an RPG because you're playing as a character, but just beside the point. So I never really got into that kind of stuff. You know, my world was made up of games in a particular genre that were more kind of popular, less niche type of things. And to be honest, the original like Fallout, when the first Fallouts came out, the first Elder Scrolls games, those were very niche type of games. And they started to gain some popularity into the mid 2000s or so. I know my brother played Oblivion when it came out. That was still one of his favorite games. He loved Morrowind and Oblivion. And then Fallout New Vegas came out in Fallout 3, and I don't even remember hearing anything about those games. I think they came out in 2004 to 2007 range. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember offhand. But I wasn't really in that genre of games. I was playing like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas at the time or Doom 3, like nothing that would put me in the realm of Fallout. And then Skyrim came out in 2011. I didn't actually play it when it came out. I was in Iraq in 2011 for first half of the year, so and then it came out later in the year, but I was still like getting out of the getting ready to get out of the military and transition into civilian life. I had kids. Like, gaming was not at the top of my mind at the time. But then I wound up actually picking up Skyrim a year or two after it released. I loved it. I had a lot of fun with it. You know, it was, to this day, one of my favorite games. My oldest daughter plays Skyrim on it. She loves Skyrim because of me, right? So I introduced her to that, and I loved it. And then I saw this game, Fallout 4, that was being released. And I was like, I love Skyrim. Bethesda did good with I enjoyed it. Now, I know there's some controversy around that. We'll maybe talk about Skyrim at some point, but I liked it. I liked what Bethesda had done with Skyrim. I wanted to see what Fallout was like. So when Fallout 4 came out, at some point, I don't remember. I don't think it was right at launch. It might have been a little bit after, but I wound up picking up Fallout 4 and playing it, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It's what really got me into some of the more post-apocalyptic kind of stuff. Now, I had played the Walking Dead game before that, so post-apocalyptic wasn't like out of the realm of what I would like normally, but this was so much different because it's a nuclear fallout and the wasteland and all that kind of stuff. But it was also open world, and it was kind of free to do what you wanted to do. Now, one of the biggest problems that a lot of people have expressed when it comes to Fallout 4 specifically, was the named protagonist, the voiced protagonist, not named necessarily, but voiced protagonist, right? Because the Fallout games, the Skyrim games have been famous for you insert your own voice. And I think for a lot of people, it kind of took away their voice because they would say, you know, they would pick a line of dialogue and then they would say it in their head however they wanted to say it, or maybe even speak it out loud. And so the voice protagonist took that away from a lot of people. I personally liked it a lot, but a lot of that is because I am very story driven with these games. I prefer to have a voice protagonist. I prefer all of the characters to be voiced. Even if I'm picking the lines of dialogue, I enjoy kind of watching the cinematic nature of things. It fell flat a little bit with Fallout 4 because the cinematic nature wasn't really what you would expect. I didn't like the way they did that, but that's for a whole nother series. But when it comes to the writing, you know, I think that killed it for a lot of people. And then it just got worse from there. I didn't mind the concept of coming out of a vault after 200 years, searching for your son. I thought that was kind of an interesting concept. The biggest hurdle and the biggest problem I think that it has from that aspect, from a writing standpoint, is there is urgency, but there's not urgency. And what I mean is you come out of the vault for the first time and you're supposed to be looking for your son, who in your mind just recently was taken away from you, right? Because you unthaw, you see Sean being taken away, and then you go back to sleep, wake back up, and you got to go find him, right? But there's nowhere to search. Now, you get little inklings. You know, you talk to Codsworth. He sends you to, I can't think of the name of the town, but he sends you to the nearby town where I want to say Prescott, but that's definitely not it. But anyway, he sends you there where you meet Preston Garvey and the Minutemen, right? And then you kind of continue on from there. I'll go to the Great Green Jewel. You need to go to Diamond City, and that's where you can find Nick Valentine, who can help you track down your son, and you know, continues the story. But there's no sense of urgency to any of that. There's no timer on it. It's just kind of like, yeah, if you ever get around to it, you can literally go off and do all the side quests. You can get found a whole bunch of new cities and stuff like that for the Minutemen. You can go with the whole Brotherhood of Steel thing. You can go with the Railroad. Like there's different factions you can join. And you can do most of their questing without ever touching the main quest. From a gaming standpoint, it can be difficult from that aspect. when you have a main quest that you want players to go through, and you also want to have side quests, you want to have an open world. It's not an easy thing to do because that main quest, unless it's driving something else forward, you don't have a reason to do it. Why should I track down Sean? I have no connection to Sean. This is a baby that I was introduced to 5 minutes ago. I have no clue who he is. Why should I care, right? The player character, whether it's the guy or the girl, either one, has gone through a whole pregnancy and a childbirth and all of this stuff, but me as the player has not done any of that. So I guess that's as good a place as any to start as far as where I would rewrite and what I would do if I was writing a game like Fallout or rewriting Fallout 4, is I would start with maybe not being right away in the apocalypse. A lot of apocalyptic games, they want to get you right into the action. And for a lot of players, I know it is a thing that like players are usually impatient. They usually just want to get right to the action. They don't care about the dialogue or the drama. But you got to pick a lane. You can either be a shooter where you're action packed all the time, or you can be a story-based role-playing type of game. You cannot be both successfully. You can make a lot of money doing it, because players will enjoy both aspects of little bits and pieces. But you aren't making a good story when you do that. And if you're measuring success by money, that's a whole nother thing. But the way I look at success is how engaged were people in the story? How much did they enjoy the gameplay? So for me, I would have started much, much earlier. I would have started maybe when Sean was born. Started in the hospital with Sean being born, and then spending some time with him and getting to know him and picking which parent you wanted to be before all of this starts, right? So you're either the one like that just gave birth, or you're the one that's standing next to the one that gave birth. And then spend some time going through getting to know him, bringing him home from the hospital, kind of the normal life, and maybe having the news show up in each scene in the background enough that if you pay attention, you notice that there's escalations happening in the world, but to where it's not overwhelming until you get to the day the bombs dropped. And that's when you kind of pick back up and get into things, because things are getting ready to get real, right? And by that point, you've already been introduced to your local vault. You're in the neighborhood. You're familiar with it. Maybe you've taken a tour of it, I think that would almost be kind of a cool thing too, is be able to take a tour or have some kind of orientation beforehand, right? So you know what's coming. Now, it could be a little bit difficult for certain things because the cryogenically frozen thing. I don't know. See, here's the problem with Vault Tech. with the writing in general. The Fallout universe is just so insane. The companies within it are meant to be a caricature, are meant to be an exaggeration, a worse evil, a black and white evil, and in a very obvious way when you start to realize what they did. Vault Tech was experimenting on people without their knowledge or consent. And it just doesn't make any sense to me from a writing standpoint to do that. You don't need that evil. You've got the wasteland. You've got the nukes being dropped. You've got enemies. We don't need these evil corporations around every corner. Like every company is evil. So I would almost have Vault Tech even be upfront with their experiments. Hey, we're going to be cryogenically freezing you. In the event the bombs drop, this is what you can expect. And in the thinking that it's never going to happen, because most people would go through that and they'd be like, it's good to have that security, but it's never going to happen. But they could sell it really, really well. Hey, we've got your local vault. You're invited in. We aren't going to charge you anything because you're living in the neighborhood here. We're going to be cryogenically freezing you so that we can wake you up in the future whenever society is rebuilt, right? And then have the stuff happen in the background after you're frozen. So the alarms go off. We see the TV, the news, breaking news that there's bombs being dropped. We rush to the vault. We take our wife or husband and baby and get to the vault, and we get inside and we're like, okay, we're going to be frozen. And when we wake up, it'll be a bright new future. and then you go black. And all hell breaks loose in the background. So you still have the scene where you wake up and you see your son being stolen. And you're like, what the hell's going on? And you wind up going back to sleep and you still wake up and the son's still gone. I don't know that I would kill off the spouse per se. From a motivational standpoint, it doesn't really provide a lot of motivation. It does in a way because like you really want to go after the person that killed your spouse, but they killed your spouse and stole your son. And that's just adding a bunch of random motivation in that doesn't need. You already want to get your son back, so I would probably keep the spouse alive, or at least not being shot, maybe there's a malfunction with their cryopod, something like that could happen. If you really don't want them to be a person or to be a character within the universe, but it's not necessary, right? For the writing, from a writing standpoint, you're already motivated to go get Sean. Then coming out of the vault, I think it makes a lot of sense to come out of the vault and go into a world, obviously the world that's broken, a world that's been taken down. I think it's cool they had Cogsworth there. I think that's a really cool thing. But you need a timer. You need something to push you forward to where you need to go. At least if you want the story to work, right? Because, or alternatively, instead of thinking that your son is still a baby and finding out over the course of events that he aged 10 years and then he aged 60 years or whatever, instead of finding that out over time, maybe you find out pretty quick. Maybe you go to Cogsworth and you're like, hey, so we were cryogenically frozen, which he knows because we told him, we didn't expect that you would still be here. It's cool you're still here. But somebody came in and stole Sean while we were in there. And Cogsworth says, oh, well, it was, that's been about 6 decades ago now that I saw that, if my chronometer's right. I remember seeing that somebody came out, went up to the vault, and they came out, and I thought they were carrying a bundle, but it's been a while. Nobody's been in, I've kept an eye on it. Nobody's really been in or out of it in 60 years. To which you can go, oh, shit, maybe he's dead. Maybe there's no hope in finding him at all. Like, that would be devastating on the one hand because you just lost your child. And, that could be a reason why it would be more impactful to have lost your spouse too, because now you're all alone in this world and you're like, I don't even know if there's a reason to search for Sean. But you hear rumblings of this institute. And maybe Cogsworth had something that led him to believe that they looked like maybe scientists that had taken him. So now you're maybe looking for retribution on the institute, right? You aren't necessarily in a hurry to rush to hunt your son, but you want to find out more about the Institute. And you can find out more about the Institute through the Railroad, through the Brotherhood of Steel, by going to Diamond City and getting to know, Nick Valentine is a sense. You get to talk to Nick Valentine. Maybe he has some information on the Institute, so you can unravel the mystery throughout without being in a rush, without being in a pretend rush. Because if you don't try to rush through the story, what incentive do you have? Now you don't need an incentive because you don't need to rush through. Now it's a matter of, I just want to find these people. I want to figure out what the hell happened. I want to know where they are. I want to track them down, find out what happened to Sean after they stole him from me. And all of the emotions are still there. And you can still go through the story to figure out how to get in. And you break into the Institute the same way that you normally would, or using whatever group you want to use. And that's when you meet Sean. That's when you find out the leader of the Institute is your son. He's 60 years old. He's old now. And now you have to make a decision on how you want to handle that. They took you, but it was to better mankind, technically, is what he says, so there's all of that there. I think that makes for a much better story overall. And gives you still a reason to search for them. You still can find him. But it takes away this fake urgency at the beginning that doesn't really exist. There's no timer in Fallout. That was one of my biggest problems with it when I played it the first time, was like, I'm supposed to feel in a rush for this, but then I've got all these side quests. Preston Garvey's asking me every 5 minutes to go help a settlement. The Brotherhood of Steel is asking me, sending me out on tasks for them. The Minutemen want me to go do stuff for them. Like, everybody has tasks for me, side missions everywhere. And I'm the only one that really cares about finding my son, other than Nick Valentine. You know, when you meet him, Nick and Piper, they become very helpful, but until you meet them, nobody else cares. Nobody else is even trying, you know? So take the urgency out. That's all. That would be amazing, I think. I would also want to reform some of the characters, obviously. The main one being Preston Garvey, of course. Preston Garvey and the Minutemen is a great idea, because the idea of being able to rebuild society, to be able to lift things up. And perhaps, you know, they had tried. We know that there was some trial and they'd attempted it, and then they had kind of fallen apart. The Minutemen fell apart in the end. But maybe the player, having their military experience or loyally, I would also make Nora a JAG officer, I think, because that way they're both in the military. They both have that experience. But I would have them have some leadership credentials that maybe the Minutemen didn't have before, because after the bombs went off and most people died and some people survived, maybe they just couldn't get, especially over time, they couldn't get the organization together. So you come along with that organizational know-how and that ability to get things done. And instead of sending you every 5 minutes to do another settlement needs your help, I would rather have a setup where, hey, we've identified a spot we think would make for a great settlement. We've been trying to get it, you know, not every 5 minutes, but like you go to Garvey and you say, hey, I want to expand on our group. I think we're doing good. We've got this one settlement at Sanctuary that's really thriving. We've got traders coming in and out, and it's really doing well. We've got good security. Why don't we expand? Do you have any ideas where we can expand to? And then Garvey can respond, well, yeah, there's this drive-in movie theater over here that it would be a great spot for a base if we want to set up there, you know? And now you have an incentive to go set up a base there because it gives you reinforcements. It also allows you to swell your numbers. And especially if you're trying to get into the Institute, maybe you're trying to fight the Institute, or you're trying to maybe use them to help the Institute. You know, maybe you've gotten in the Institute and you want to help them out. I think that would be an outstanding thing if you could redirect some of the Minutemen as part of the Institute above ground. I think that would make for a much better situation. And then the settlements can kind of, you get them to a point where they can help themselves out, right? And if they need help, they call in people from other settlements, right? You maybe are told about the settlement is getting assistance or something. We're sending assistance to the settlement, but not necessarily you have to go there or letting you every 5 minutes that you need to be there. Definitely take away the Radiant quest from Preston, because those are annoying. But that also leads me into the Institute when I said maybe you could use them as to kind of prop up the Institute. The Institute storyline, this whole the whole mankind redefined. We're going to make mankind better by creating sense, and we're going to replace people with sense, and we're downright evil, right? I would take a lot of that out. I would have the Institute still wanting to make the world a better place, but more of a, you have the terms book smart versus street smart, right? I see the Institute as a very book smart. We know biology, we know chemistry, we know, we can kind of develop things, and we can improve technology, but we aren't good at organization. And that's where the player's role in the military and the organizational structure with the Minutemen can come into play. Hey, we can help you guys. You guys give us technology for our bases up top, and we will help you to expand and grow. There would still need to be, because there has to be, you want the moral choices. You want the individual moral choices. And I would say in that instance, the moral choice would have to be something along the lines of maybe some of the things they are doing aren't necessarily completely ethical. Maybe some of the experiments they're doing aren't completely ethical. Perhaps some of the technology that they're using isn't isn't the best technology for humanity, but it works. Maybe it's harmful in some ways, but it's helpful in others. Kind of like the experiments you can do with Vault 88 in the DLC, the workshop DLC, where you can decide how you want different experiments to go that can maybe benefit one thing while hurting another. You know, we will hurt morale a little bit, but we're going to have electricity. You know, you need to have that aspect in there just a little bit, because otherwise it might get a little bit boring if it's just like obvious to side with them. It could be that they've caused problems in the past. Maybe like stealing Sean, you know, was an unethical thing. Maybe instead of replacing people with sense, which there's a whole moral conundrum there as far as replacing people with sense, but it makes the Institute black and white evil, right? When you are stealing people and you're replacing them with sense. Maybe instead they aren't telling people about sense. Maybe people know that there's some oddities out there, but they don't know exactly what those oddities are, you know? And so maybe that's one of the things you have to decide as the Institute or working with the Institute, is whether to have sense come out and work your farms or something like that. And then you find out that the Scents are sentient. And now it's a question of, well, should we let them run free? Do we want them to be able to get away and do things? You know, because right now with the way that the story is, you've got the Scents, people are being replaced with Scents. You've got Scents that are becoming sentient and wanting to be set free. So you have those two huge branching things. And while the replacing with people with sense is black and white evil, because you're killing somebody and replacing them with a robot, the freedom of sense is a really interesting topic. That's one that the Detroit Become Human did really well talking about, kind of, except Detroit was androids. Scents are synthetic humans. They're indistinguishable from humans, save for a tiny little thing that's placed in their brain. You don't know that somebody's a synth until they're dead and you find a synth component on their corpse. So that could be for a really interesting thing, because who do you trust? Do you trust the motivations, right? Are you using these synths against their will? Are the synths that come up to you programmed to say certain things? Are they trying to manipulate you? There's a whole layer of things that could be really interesting to discuss there. But I think that's about where I want to get to with this, because I want to discuss this in a few different videos, digging into the story, but more digging into the inner workings of each group and how they could be. I do this all off the cuff, right? I don't come up with notes. I don't have anything to read. That's why it's called unscripted in the first place. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts out there about what some of those things and what you would have liked to see as well, because I think Fallout 4 could have been so much better. It was already a lot of fun. There's already some interesting aspects in there. I think there could have been some better choices. I think it would have been interesting to have a way that you could potentially have peace amongst all the groups, or have all of them destroyed, or some combination of each. You know, that would have given the most freedom, I think, depending on how you played. And if you were a negotiator type, where you wanted to negotiate and keep everybody peaceful, you could have argued that the Brotherhood of Steel was maybe a good security force. You could argue to the Institute, maybe in front of them, that, hey, the Minutemen have a good point here. Like, we're keeping these synths are becoming sentient. They have a self-awareness. They have a consciousness. Let's debate how that consciousness affects them, and whether maybe the Minutemen are right on some aspects. Maybe when these things become conscious, we should just let them kind of be out there and doing their thing. They're not a machine. They are flesh and blood with a mechanical component inside of them, but they are flesh and blood for all intents and purposes. And maybe have that back and forth. And maybe you could come to a negotiation table kind of similar in a little bit of a way to how in Skyrim, when you can bring in the Empire and the Stormcloaks up to the Greybeards, and you can kind of negotiate a peace for the moment so that you can take out the dragons. Maybe something similar where you're just trying to find peace within the wasteland. Hey, the Minutemen will rebuild everything. You know, the Brotherhood of Steel, hey, you guys are kind of messed up for your wanting to steal technology or hoard all the technology. Let's discuss how this goes, and let's have a moral discussion on whether it's right for you to do that. Because what if you guys go rogue? There's a lot of things that could be talked about. And I'm going to get into those in future videos. But share your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think. I'm planning on continuing this series and discussing different things over time. I don't know that I will discuss Fallout 4 in subsequent, sequential videos. So, I don't know that next week's video will be about Fallout 4, for instance. I tend to kind of go with whatever happens to be on my mind at the time. And some of that is driven by your comments. Some of that is driven by whatever games I might have been seeing, or if I've been watching a video or something like that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Anything you want to hear me talk about. Say hi to Neville in the comments below. He's over here trying to get everybody's attention. And join the Patreon or channel memberships. I've got channel memberships here on YouTube and a Patreon where you get early access to videos, name on the screen, all of that fun stuff. I really appreciate everybody that signs up for those things because it helps me continue to drive on and push on. And I'm trying to avoid taking any kind of sponsorships down the road. Sponsorships are a big thing on YouTube. I won't take a sponsorship from a brand I don't believe in, but at the same time, I really just don't want to have to take sponsorships if I don't have to. And fan funding is a great way to avoid doing that. But that's all I've got for this one, I think. Yeah, I believe that's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.